If you okay, we're live. Okay, that was faster than I expected, but well, anyway, here we are once more unto the breach, dear friends, and this is Overthinking Comics, and I'm here tonight. My name is Hillel, and this is Brian with me, and we're going to talk about Superman tonight. Not just Superman, but three eras of Superman. What were the differences and the similarities? Is the man of tomorrow the man of yesterday? Or is he something else? Does he still stand for truth, justice, the American way? Or what are his current values? And Brian, can you give us kind of a background on these three issues you've chosen? Maybe you can tell us what issues you chose to talk about and what they're about.
Sure. Yeah, just kind of looked back through my my archives and picked out one just based on year alone. So I had Superman from the first volume, 176. That was from April of 1965. The second issue is Superman 65, the second volume. That's March of 1992. And then the last issue would be issue 28. That is volume 5, and that's February of 2021. So roughly 27 to 29, kind of 30 years apart. I thought it'd be, yeah. So it's kind of fun. So Superman 176, we have 3 stories with 3 different writers. Just kind of small, very, kind of like newspaper comics, like kind of beginning, middle, end, very, very structured stories. The first story is called Revenge of the Super Pets, which there was a cat, a dog, and like a monkey, and I think a horse. And
yeah,
it's kind of funny. And the Super Pets, and they Superman takes them back in time to visit this philanthropist who is seen as angry and immoral, and they look at his life that he was bad to animals in a certain ways, and so the animals have to kind of reconcile this, and they face him one by one in different scenarios, such as a circus or whatnot. But here you really see Superman is a very, I don't want to say human, but you see him very humane. I call this like the Superman, the humanitarian. And this theme kind of runs through. Even the second story is Tales of Green Kryptonite, number 2, in which we, deal with the kryptonite, how that reduces Superman to almost nothing when he comes in contact with the substance from his homeworld. A professor finds a way to reverse the polarity or negate the effects of green kryptonite, in which allows Superman to be around it without any ill effects, but it's now reversed in that it harms humans. So Superman is not happy with this, being the humanitarian that he is, takes the kryptonite to his newly made Fortress of Solitude to hide it, in which the effects wear off, and now he's ill again, and so he tosses it into space, and no more with the kryptonite. But you get to see some of the iconic Superman elements, such as the kryptonite and the Fortress of Solitude. And then the third little story in issue 176 was The Day of Truth, which is a phenomenally interesting story. So there's a Superman and Supergirl are featured in this small tale, in which to pay homage to a Kryptonian hero who told the truth, named Valor. He both him and Supergirl must tell the truth in every scenario, even if it hurts or offends the individual in their presence. So he's faced with Lois Lane, Jimmy Olsen, and a couple of different scenarios, even in court, where he has to tell the truth no matter what. So he finds ways. After he hurts a few feelings, he begins to say, this isn't working out so well. So he finds ways to kind of obfuscate and circumvent, like maybe speaking too loud, or in the cover, he writes so fast that no one gets to see his secret identity. So he performs the truth, but not in a way that is revealing. So he kind of finds a way.
I have to say that with the cover, I looked at that and I said, well, how does he get out of this one? And I realized, well, just write his Kryptonian name. That's also his real name.
Right. Beautiful.
So why not just write your Kryptonian name, right? Solve the problem.
That solves the problem. Yeah. And that would have been the truth as well. So it would have been also.
Sure.
But, so he finds very super ways to get around telling the truth. So that was issue 176. Like I said, I kind of encapsulate that as the humanitarian. Although he shows these things that are superhuman or alien, if you will, it really shows the moral fortitude of this guy, and how he, even though he wants to tell the truth, like in that last tale, he finds a way to do it without harming people. And so there's really no superpower necessarily, just his
Yeah.
wit in able to do this. Moving on to the second selection, second volume, number 65. This is in the 90s, which my heyday. I was cutting my teeth on Superman at this time. This is an interesting tale where Brainiac has taken control of War World and is slowly heading toward Earth. Realizing the threat, the new gods come to Earth and meet up with Superman. Superman says, "Okay, you guys take care of it." When he quickly realizes they can't do it alone, that he needs to get involved, and that he himself is going to need help. So he really amasses a large conglomeration of other heroes. There's a couple of pages where you see just many heroes. Some are a little bit obscure. We have like Deathstroke, Fire and Ice, Flash, Batman, Booster Gold, Blue Beetle, the Metal Men. Some ones I don't really know the name of.
Deathstroke wasn't even a hero; he was a villain. What was he? Had he gone through a reformation during the 90s, or it was just this one-off situation? They hired him as a mercenary.
Yeah, I think he was always kind of the hired gun, so always out for himself. And if you could tell him, hey, this is good for you, he would go along with it. There's certain characters like that. Okay. But yeah, sure. I guess at this moment Superman could. So I guess what this issue shows is Superman has a very, I want to say, almost militant feel, where he's very tactical in his nature. He's thinking logistics, he's thinking organization, and he goes and each conversation with each individual hero or mercenary, if you will, he's able to kind of come down to their level, meet them where they are, and have the conversation of how important this is to fight off War World and Brainiac. So you really see a very inspirational Superman, but somewhat militant in a way that he's very, very business ended in this light. Mm-hmm. The last issue is toward the end of Brian Michael Bendis' run, which we can talk about another time, but issue 28 of volume 5. And this story, it kind of had a lackluster ending for me to Bendis' run. There were highs and lows. We'll just say it that way. So there's the planet name. In fact, I forget the planet name. There was that was basically Superman was the foretold, kind of prophesied threat to this planet. So they developed their own hero, and they basically trained his whole life to fight Superman, to be able to match him. This creature's kind of creates this preemptive assault on Superman, and they have a hard time communicating. I don't know if it was like a weird thing. Any which way, Superman shows this empathy that even though he can't communicate with his character, he's going to find a way to make this happen. So he follows him off. Rather than destroy a metropolis or Earth, he goes into the Phantom Zone, in which he is now away from the sun, and his powers begin to wane. So once the story continues, in this issue, we have Superman coming to this planet and kind of reconciling with that he's looked at as the villain, and that the planet there is. They're not happy with Superman coming there. They feel like their hero in leading Superman back was, did the opposite of what he was supposed to do. And Superman, even though Superman goes to war at the end, defeating the, I want to say, rebel forces of this planet, he is able to. So I think it shows two sides of Superman. What I'm trying to say is kind of the modern contradiction of the warrior and the empath. So he kind of recognizes the situation, cuts through all the jargon of the two warring factions within the planet. That some want to have this battle, some don't. Either way, Superman's able to understand the scenario, defeat the appropriate forces, and then side up with, basically the individual who was set to defeat him. So he was able to turn a foe into an ally. So we have, three very different eras of Superman. Like I said, I encapsulate the first one is kind of the humanitarian. The second is militant yet inspirational, and the third one is kind of the empath and the warrior.
It sounds
Superman,
like.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say it sounds like from the third story line with Bendis, a very common trope in modern comics, which is you think you're a good guy, but I'll show you why. To some people, you're a bad guy.
Right.
Like they like to take this, like the view of good, flip it on its head and say, well, to some people it's evil. And it just reminds me of the Star Wars, The Revenge of the Sith, where Obi-Wan's like, the Sith are evil, Anakin. Anakin goes, well, in my viewpoint, you're evil. He goes, well, you're just a moron then. That was his response. But I think that people in comics and in other forms of entertainment like to take that position seriously. Like I can't watch a British TV show like Doctor Who without them feeling like the Doctor has done horrible things and he's a little bit evil. He's the good guy, but he's kind of evil. Like there's the one with the 10th Doctor, and he's fighting the Daleks, and Davros makes his appearance. And Davros, his plan and the plan of the Daleks is to wipe out all life throughout the universe except for Daleks. And it's failed because the Doctor and his companions have started blowing, they've done something that now they're blowing everybody up. And the Doctor says, come on, Davros, I can save you. You don't have to die, which number one is a big problem because why would you save him? He's evil. He's trying to kill everyone. And secondly, Davros then throws an accusation at him about how he's this evil person for wiping out the Daleks. And he gives him these titles. And I don't know. So Doctor Who's got this weird thing going on where there's another situation where he runs across someone who, puts the Doctor to the test. Turns out it's a possible future version of the Doctor who dislikes himself, and it just has a self-loathing is why he does it. And so you have these elements. It's in like all forms of media, whether it's like in Britain or in America, the idea that the hero's only a hero to some people, but not a hero to everyone, and that because they're not a hero to everyone, that's a failure on their part. And I don't like that approach because it's an approach that says there is no standard of morality. And that's really what the point of the whole thing is that we're gonna show you that. But the problem is they put the hero and they say, you see, this person didn't like what you did, but it's like, well, yeah, he's a bad guy. He's trying to kill people. Of course, he doesn't like the fact that I stopped him and put him in jail. He calls it evil. Well, so what? It's this thing where they take morality and they ignore it. So it's interesting that you have that. But the first book that you brought out is Superman doing a story where he has to absolutely tell the truth, which is another extreme. So that's another extreme. And I feel like there it's almost like the recognition is that maybe being perfectly honest is not smart. Maybe there are reasons to have secrets. There are reasons to not, to be somewhat deceptive sometimes, or not to just tell everybody what's going on, which brings me to another trope of modern comic book TV shows, and that is if you really trust me and love me, then you will tell me every one of your secrets. You will keep no secrets from me, and you will always tell me your secrets. And the fact that you aren't telling me my secrets means that I have a reason to reject you. And I hate that. That's another trope that I hate. So anyway, so it's interesting you have that on two ends. You got the humanitarian, the truth teller, or he tries it. Superman's the one, the Superman movie, he always tells the truth. He never lies, he claimed in the first one, but he's always lying about his secret identity. So, that, so he's a liar from that standpoint. Um, but you have this very moralistic Superman at the beginning. At the end, you've got a Superman who, even though he, I guess, ostensibly does the right thing, um, maybe it's only right in some people's eyes, not everybody's eyes. So can we really celebrate him as a hero? But in the middle of that, you've got the war hero, you've got the warrior that you talked about, the
Mhm.
leader, the general, who's commanding his troops and organizing them, possibly sending them off to die. Um, and Rick writes in, keeping secrets isn't always about trust. That's right. So it's a kind of a dumb trope that they have in these TV shows. So anyway, it's interesting that you picked these three. I'm sure by accident, but there's an interesting thread that's going through this, and you're looking at Superman in these different ways. The first one is about Superman being something, he being super even without powers. He doesn't need
Mhm.
powers to be super. The next one is like he's like Superman the King, really like the president. When you talked about him being very inspiring and leading the troops, it made me think of Independence Day, where Bill Pullman gives that speech at the end of the movie. Right?
Mhm.
He's very
Sure.
very presidential, very we've
Yeah.
got to win for everybody, right? And so this is then almost a display of who Superman is on the inside and manifesting it for other people to make other people kind of like him, to make them
Mhm.
also aspire to what Superman tries to hold. It is one of the things I always loved about Superman is that he is this person who the reason he's able to inspire others is because he truly believes these things inside. And then you've got the last book you brought up. You've got where now we've come with a Superman where it doesn't really matter who he is on the inside. It doesn't really matter that he does good things on the outside. What matters is everybody's perception of him determines whether or not he's a hero or not. Whereas
Mhm.
that's something that we've classically rejected. We've classically rejected that people's perceptions of you can
Right.
can make you determine whether you're a good guy or bad guy. So that was my intro.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like we both mentioned in the beginning, the '60s version, he's a Superman. He's in more, um, I want to say, like, pedestrian type, normal everyday events, but he's going to exude these amazing moral choices. He's going to choose to even though he can get rid of kryptonite, let's say, it's going to hurt other people. So
Right.
all of a sudden, that's a non-answer, and it's taken away. Um, and then within that 30-year span, we come to in the '90s where Superman becomes this symbol. It's he's more than we've developed a man, and we've come to this super aspect where he's something more. He's going to go into space, and he is going to lead a team of 50 plus maybe heroes, and he's going to handpick them and be able to lead them, and have inspirational things for each and every one of them. And he's also going to be able to do things that all of them maybe can't do, or you really see the super aspect of him. And then by the end, not the end, but the last issue 28, he really is a symbol. It's Superman is more, and that's kind of what the end of that run is doing, is really creating a symbol and shoes for Jonathan Kent to fill, and which we know now we've Clark is no longer the main Superman. Now Jonathan Kent, his son, has taken that role, but you really see the development of the symbol and how he's something. It's some being Superman is bigger than one person. So you really see with these three comics over this span of time, you see an amazing development from the idea of morality to the idea of symbology, and you know
That's an interesting point. And could you just one more time, Rick doesn't know which comics we're talking about. Could you list those off again for him?
absolutely. So from 1965 we have Volume 1, issue 176. From 1992, that's Volume 2, we have issue 65. And from 2021, Volume 5, and that's issue 28. So they're each rough. I picked them because they're roughly 30 years apart, 60s, 90s, and then 20.
Right. So so it's interesting how Superman has changed. I don't. Um, one of the books that I felt was a good representation of the clash of um, the I guess traditional Superman versus the idea of being a hero in the modern world was Kingdom Come.
Oh, dude, I was going to mention to talk about that. That's a phenomenal book.
It is. It's a great book, and it's interesting because he removes himself from society for a long because his values aren't really able to match. I mean, he suffered a tragedy with Lois, if I remember correctly. But when he re-enters the people who are heroes in this world, there's no difference between them and the bad guys. Really, it's just people have powers blasting each other. And then Superman is this person who, um, has a completely different a viewpoint, a different morality that he brings into it. And there's this clash between he and his beliefs and versus the those who are the replacements, the next generation.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to talk about that book in a future issue.
We are going to have to, yeah. It deserves its own program. I'll have to reread it again. It's been a few years since I've read it, but I love the book. I love the artwork. I love the book.
Mm-hmm.
But
Alex Ross, right?
oh yeah, I mean it's not that he was the first. Maybe I don't even know the best, but there's something about his artwork, this realism, this hyperrealism that gave these silly characters more of a grounding, in some ways.
Yeah.
And you can tell more human stories sometimes with his artwork. They just took a lot longer to produce. That's funny. Okay. As long as Superman exists, he will have issues, Rick says. That's funny. Okay, so I want to say that I've read a few of the original series runs, and I loved some of those old stories. My favorite by far was the guy who tried to sell Superman insurance, life insurance, and that's always been my favorite. It always stuck out. I read it. My mom had it. It was part of her collection, and it was just this great story that was like, his point was, well, Superman, if something happens to you, then not only do you die, but the whole planet Earth is in danger at that point. There's all these things that you're protecting us from: floods and damage, alien invasions, yada yada yada. You got to think about the people on Earth. That's a, you really you need insurance to help replace you to some extent if something ever happens to you. And Superman's attitude is, I'm Superman. What could happen to me? And so by the end of it, there's a crisis Superman faces, almost dies, and he goes, oh, I guess you have a point. So he goes and crushes some coal, produces some diamonds, and says, okay, here's my first month's premium on this thing. So I don't know. It was such a crazy idea. It was so interesting though. And people wouldn't get it if you had that story today. There would be no way they could connect with that, I don't think. Not the younger generation. I mean, something has to explode, people have to die and things like that. But I love that issue. And it just, I know a lot of people, it's so popular in the comics community to complain about the Comic Code Authority. And they talk about how cheesy and everything some of those comics were, but some of those comics were great. After all, let's not forget that comics were essentially for children. Superheroes are for kids.
Right.
I mean, that's how they originally was. I'm not saying that adults like us can't enjoy them, but making them kid friendly, I don't really see what the problem is with that. It's all it's before we came to Israel, I started going to this comic shop I'd visit every now and then. And I wanted to take my kids in to be able to enjoy some great comics, but I couldn't take them in because everywhere I looked, was just inappropriate material. Women half naked or whatever, and statues and blood and all this kind of stuff everywhere on the covers of the comics and in the store. I just went, this is not for kids. This is not for kids at all. This is not kid friendly. If you want something kid friendly, you buy like DuckTales or something like that, or Donald
Right.
Duck Adventure, right? That's as kid friendly as you can get. And there's definitely something that
Yeah.
comics has lost. And there's an imaginative, wonderful quality in some of those old Superman comics where it wasn't just about him having powers. It was using his wits, like you mentioned, and his powers were just a blunt object that didn't always solve his problems. Whereas
Mhm.
now we're supposed to use powers to fix everything. Rick writes, another good arc is when he had to face off against two Superman after he had been locked away in a pocket outside time and space, 23 years. I didn't read that one. That sounds like an interesting one. Um, look, so the 90s is like that was really more of my experience. Where I really got into Superman as far as collecting him was with John Byrne's Man of Steel series,
Mhm.
and that was post Crisis. You had the Crisis. I
Yep.
mean, I collected all the Crisis books, and then I loaned some to the friend, and I lost part of the collection. Yeah. But they were restarting the character, and one of the things that Burns wanted to do was depower Superman. He was just too strong. They did the same thing with
Mhm.
the Flash. The Flash was too fast, and so they depowered the Flash, and they took some of their characters down a notch because they were just too unimaginably powerful. It was hard to come up with people to fight. But from the reintroduction of the characters in sort of a new light in 85 with Man of Steel and the movie forward into the 90s. I loved it. I loved the fact that he and Lois finally got engaged and got married in the 90s. That was another positive output. It
Mhm.
was like the character was going somewhere.
Right.
And he wasn't going anywhere. He was sort of locked in time for many, many years because they just wanted this Superman so they could sell merchandise and sell comic books, and this is what everybody thinks Superman is, and we're just gonna write our stories to whatever the expectations people already have of him. And
Mhm.
then the '90s, they got old, and they were facing a crisis of the lack of money, so they started doing more interesting things with the kid, like we talked about in a previous issue of the show. We had the death of Superman
Right.
and the minor back injury of Batman and from those launched off some interesting new characters and things that they got to explore for a few years. Um, Also, the reintroduction of Supergirl as a alien life form, more like a synthetic life form of some sort,
Right.
shape-shifting abilities, which was interesting for a while.
Yeah.
Uh, that character has quietly disappeared, lost in another alternate timeline. Unfortunately, I liked her. Um, but So '90s was a great era for its own reasons, and I did like this idea of the Superman the general, and I always
Mhm.
loved the fact that he was the leader, and everybody looked to him as the leader. But the reason him as the leader was because we all like a good king, right? We always want a benevolent monarchy. If you have a benevolent monarchy, then a benevolent monarchy, I think, is much better than than any kind of democracy that you could have. Um, because if you have a good king who's working on behalf of the best intentions for his people, then you're going to have more justice, and you're going to have hopefully less politics that are going to interfere with the ability to do the right thing. Uh, Plato and his Republic, marks democracy down as the fourth worst form of government. That's fourth out of five forms of government. And he says because a democracy can lead to a tyranny because they'll just vote the tyranny in, and then the tyrant takes over, and then democracy is gone, and then
Mhm.
you're sort of left with repeating the cycle all over again. Of course, in America, you don't have a pure democracy; it's a republic, it's a democratic republic, so it's a little bit different. But anyway, not to get into that. But so I really enjoyed the '90s Superman. It had some great stories. I wasn't as taken with the artwork was okay. Uh, I was definitely seduced by the art coming from Marvel, and so I ended up stopping my collections of DC comics, or I reduced it a great deal because I was so interested in what was going on at Marvel's characters, and then Image came out and all that. But modern Superman, I don't know. I've never really taken a liking to him. I think he's okay, but there haven't been that many stories that I've really enjoyed from him. And I've never really collected modern Superman stories. I'm talking about modern. I'm talking about like the 2000s, starting from the 2000s.
Mhm.
Today, I've just never really collected it because they were just one-off stories of Superman beating somebody up a lot of times. It lost a certain charm in a lot of ways
Right.
for some of the characters that I saw. And so the things I'm reading with Jonathan Kent being the new Superman now, I'm not thrilled with any of that. I don't know. What are your thoughts spanning the generations between these? Do you think it's a improvement or a lesser Superman, or what are your thoughts about that?
I guess in rereading some of these issues, kind of glancing through them earlier this week, there was certain distance between the character and the person. You in the beginning, like maybe '60s, you uplifted this man. He's going to do the right thing. How's he going to do or get out of this scenario? How's he going to show his superior morality? So it was like you're saying, like it was something a child could really get into and learn from. Whereas the '90s, we begin to expand into, I don't want to say more cultural issues, but they really modernized him in the fact that he was dealing with more issues. And just because Superman in the '90s that's the Superman that I really, read the most of, and that was my first introduction. It's the one I liked the most. I thought he was a character he had depth.
Yeah.
A lot of depth. Whereas the newer Superman is, I don't know, there's this aloofness again, but in a different way. And they've made him so larger than life that he is this gigantic force that we want to
You know what I think it is?
What?
I think that modern Superman is trading off of the street creds he earned in the previous 60 years of his run. Like, I think that if you take a modern Superman, he has no depth himself. So the fact that Superman is a symbol, like you said, comes from the '90s Superman, where he really becomes, and the morality from the earlier ones, and the modern Superman is just like, I got this S. You know what it means, right? You know that when you see this S, right, that I can beat people up well, but I'm also a nice guy, right? And that's really all it's become, is that I'm a nice guy who beats people up and saves people from being crushed by other super powerful guys. And I don't think that this modern Superman has ever had to earn. It's just like if you watch the Justice League movie, right? The Superman they had there was a much darker Superman for no apparent reason. And then he fights a Batman, and they're going toe to toe, and the Batman does not like him at all. And then he dies. Batman goes, that's too bad. I kind of liked him, right? And then by the next movie, Batman is thinking fondly back to Superman, how he was a symbol of hope, and he always did the right thing. You're going, wait a second. When did this happen? You've been doing for one beatdown in the city, and after that he died, and then you haven't known him. So when did you develop this love for Superman and knew all these intimate details about him? And we've never had seen those things. The way he described Superman in the Justice League movie was not the way Superman had been shown in Man of Steel, in the two Man of Steel movies. And I think what they got was people want a person who is more like the traditional Superman.
Hmm.
So rather than develop that in the movies, they just took it for granted. Everybody knows what Superman is. Everybody knows Superman is a symbol. Everybody knows Superman's a good person, and so putting those words in Batman's mouth, it's just like poetry. Poetry, modern poetry is very self-referencing, right? And that's so if you don't like reading lots of poetry, you're not going to get modern poetry because it's always self-referenced. It's referencing other poetry. And so if you don't know the other poetry, you'll never get the point of the current poetry. So if you're a person who frankly has never collected comics and is only vaguely aware of Superman, you go see a movie, right? You're not going to know these things about Superman. He's a good person and that he's got moral depth and yada 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 yada.
Hmm.
And so then just saying, well, you know what we're talking about, wink wink, the books we've been publishing for the last 80 years, right? It just does, I don't think it works out. I don't know if they've quite grabbed onto that yet. But anyway, so modern Superman, I feel like they're kind of winking to the audience, going, "You guys know he's the Man of Steel. He's this
Hmm.
guy who always does the right thing. We don't know what the right thing is, but we're going to meander around and kind of
Yeah.
maybe that's what he does, whatever it is."
I think I hear what you're saying because earlier off, it seems like they've really created like the Superman, the moral man is really where this
Yeah,
kind of comes from. Like I said, like the Day of Truth was one of the stories, and Revenge of the Super Pets when they come against someone who's was not humanitarian against animals. So I think as like an inverted pyramid, as time progresses, what is right and wrong really kind of becomes wider and wider and wider, and so. The Superman seems more defined because his morality is more defined. Whereas as it progresses, like for instance, in issue 28 here, the last issue that we have selected here, um, I think one of the struggles was finding scenarios in which there's a clear right and wrong. And we talked about this and maybe, the JLA
right.
number two, but this idea of morality, it's because I think cultural morality is changed. The ideas of morality has changed. The ideas of what a moral man have changed, and therefore I think it's reflected in Superman, because I don't feel like Superman has changed all that much over the course of the years. It's that the moral situations they put him in, the decisions they have him making, what is clearly right and wrong. I mean, in the beginning, you know who the villains are, you know who the right people are, and Superman, he's eventually going to figure out who is who. Um, he could change the kryptonite, but he wouldn't dare do it because it hurt people, and so off the table instantly. Here, I mean, the threat is in the middle. Issue 65, we had the threat of an invading planet, Brainiac. He's going to hurt, enslave all of Earth, or destroy it, whatever Brainiac's plan is at the time. So there's a clear threat, and then by the end here, we have these kind of nebulous kind of morality concepts where they like we talked about the reversal, that maybe Superman's the threat to another place, and he's got to
Right.
reconcile with, I've got this great power, and how am I perceived? And so you really
Yeah.
see this empathetic Superman develop, where you don't see it as much in the 90s, I'd say.
Right. And but and the problem with modern views of morality, is that there is no universal moral values that don't exist. There's a lot of values that people hold to according to their political platforms. Usually,
Mm.
from what I can tell, it's typically, our party. These are the moral issues for our party, and that's what we call moral. But there's no thought in it. There's
Mm.
no systematic sort of moral thought to it. It's pretty shallow, and it's
Right.
often self-contradictory.
I,
For
yeah.
example, take feminism, for example. Feminism ostensibly has a good purpose to it, which is to uh, make people recognize the value of women, and make it's supposed to be pro-woman, and it's supposed to empower women. But then at the same time, for a while, they would preach things like If a woman wants to strip, that's her business. If she wants to do pornography, that's her business, right? And she should feel empowered to do it. Well, that's not empowering women, because that's just making women scummy. That's just making that's the very opposite of it. Like, women don't have empowerment really means having the ability to be who you ought to be, not you know not being able to. If you want to be a scumbag, we want to give you the power to be a scumbag. You be the best scumbag you can. That's not that's not empowering. Telling people that there aren't right and wrong, that's not empowering. That's the opposite. To take away the differences between us and animals. And let's face it, animals are typically very, very moral, in the sense that they have no choice, but they do what they're supposed to do, right? Killing is never about, I don't like the way you looked at me. It's often about survival of some sort. But anyway, so and then today, if you look at morality today, what values are being spoken about and pushed? Well, they're very contradictory. I remember someone was posting something very pro-feminist thing, and I wrote in response. I said, in a non-binary world, there are no women's issues. Right. Because if you don't have genders, then how can you have women's issues? So, but both are claimed to be important. They're both values, being non-binary and admitting to non-binariness or whatever, or numbering your genders as, let's just non-binary, as many as you want. Then there are no real gender differentiations.
Right. On that tip,
yeah.
In that vein, I've kind of seen it as almost objective driven. So I see something as right or as moral, and therefore, I'm willing to cut corners, to whatever, in order to make this objective happen. So I feel like a lot of morality today is very objective driven. That people have a goal or some, the means, is justified depending on the end. Well, what I'm doing is good, so it's okay if I steal money. When I'm doing this great thing, so therefore I can treat you bad, or whatever it is. But it's very objective driven, so that the morals, whereas we both understand, morality to be not so objective driven, and certainly not subjective, and that there are universal morals, and there are universal ethics that are, it's never correct to take a life unjustly. It's never correct to do, have illicit relations, and other things.
But it is correct to preserve your own life.
Right.
And that's a moral value as well. The value of yourself.
Absolutely.
You can kill to preserve your own life. But comics and comic themed TV shows and entertainment have struggled with this idea. And I think they don't understand what this whole thing about not killing is in comics. I think originally started off, one, because they're kids. It's really killing each other, right? But I think also because if you look at the way the characters function, take Batman and Superman, both of them don't kill. Batman originally carried a gun, but they very quickly discontinued that. But the idea, I think, is because both characters supposedly believe in law and order and justice. The only reason that Batman is a vigilante is because society has forced him to become a vigilante, because the law doesn't have the power to function, and because there are too many corrupt people in Gotham. So he has to get rid of the corrupt people so that justice can be returned to Gotham. So he can't kill because he has to. At one time, he is in one way being a vigilante, which is contrary to what he wants. But so he has to hold himself to certain strict rules so that he doesn't break the law completely. He He's breaking the law in order to return the law because, for example, given the Holocaust, which it was legal to steal from Jews and kill Jews and all that, that's an unjust law system. And where you have the law is too weak to be able to be implemented in general, then there's something to say about breaking the law in order to return the law. But that's something you have to think through. That's not something you just say, oh, I don't like those guys. Those guys are bullies. I'm gonna go put on a costume and start beating them up. Superman, on the other hand, also supports the values of a just society, but he realizes that he is so powerful he can almost do anything, and that in order to not break the power of the law system, he has to constrain himself because he doesn't kill because once he starts killing, then he has said that might makes right. The laws don't have any power, and that creates chaos. Because look, if you have some little 4'8" guy walk up to some 6'7" guy, right, with big bulging muscles, and get into an argument, if we were living in a world where might makes right, that little guy would just run away scared. He would never dare to say anything against the big muscle guy. But because of the power of the law stands behind that person, he's able to fearlessly stand up and stand up for his rights, what's right, what's wrong. So Superman has to preserve law by constraining himself. Batman has to uphold the law by going beyond the law, but they both have the same goal. And when you look at them trying to deal with this in the movies and TV shows and the comics, it's just like, to them, it's like an arbitrary decision they came to. And so they're always challenging the idea of killing people. Sometimes they just throw it out the window, it doesn't really matter. We'll just kill everybody who gets in the way, right? We're trying to be heroes, so it's okay to kill if we have to. And sometimes they're very conflicted about the fact that a villain died who's trying to kill millions of people. What are you feeling conflicted over? Yes, the Torah values all life, and everyone who is alive, and so long as someone lives, they have the potential to repent and to turn back onto a positive road. But their potential to repent cannot be allowed to interfere with my actual life or the life of other people.
Right. Yeah, and it's funny because if we go translate this over to the DC sales right now, that we see Superman is declining in sales overall. They pretty much diluted Superman, where he's only become a symbol that they can just put in infinite scenarios and kind of tell you what's right, because how would Superman be wrong? So if, let's say, then like the new Kal-El, the Son of Superman issue, where he's holding a climate change sign, well, they've now told you that climate change is a threat, and you should be on the side of Superman. They're now telling you what morality is, and I think they've kind of diluted the overall effect of Superman. Whereas Batman sales are doing phenomenally, so or consistent, and he's a very darker, and I think people are able to associate with that because he's meeting a threat with an equal threat, that is training and intelligence and technology, and those are things that are much more, I don't want to say materialistic, but are much more rational, much more in focus with maybe Enlightenment ideals.
It's more immediate too.
An immediate, absolutely, versus much more of a supreme morality, in which is displayed in like the first Superman issue that we selected today, where in each scenario it's showing Superman as an elevated individual, and he fulfills that role, and you're like, you can sigh of relief. Superman did the right thing. Yeah. Whereas we fast forward to now, it's very nebulous. Like I said, Superman is in the, they're kind of virtue signaling, telling you, what is right. Well, for instance, climate change, that is correct, or the having Superman have a issue with his gender identity or his sexual identity, that this is okay, this is correct, this is what's this is maybe normal or something. So what I'm saying is, we really do see the change, and I didn't pick a newer Superman for that very reason, because I didn't want to get off into that, but I wanted to stay with Clark Kent Superman as this individual who started out the quintessential Superman that is making moral decisions. And as we fast forward through time, those moral decisions become, somewhat diluted, in that now we just have this extremely powerful alien being, reconciling, his humanity with his alienness, if you will, and how he's going to do these things throughout the universe. Because one of the things Bendis kind of wrapped up with is Superman doing this United Planets, where he wanted to get everyone together and to take care of interplanetary, politics or threats, if you will, and it leaks out to the public, and the public are like, you're not even human. Who are you to make decisions for humanity? So we get a very politically driven, a very I want to say, I'm kind of searching for the word, but so we get this very, very divisive kind of issue where only white people can speak for white people, only dark-skinned people can speak for dark-skinned people, where we really don't want to see the overlap in that, we're all human, we all bleed, we all have these quintessential needs and desires, and we should deal with humans and possibly other beings.
It's because I think it's because you have to have other people who are not like you to become a threat for you. Ayel's been reading Rabbi Sachs' book, Not in God's Name, and she's really enjoyed it because it discusses that in order for you to have these people to come to power and utilize religion incorrectly or to do anything, you see the same patterns, whether it's political or religious or whatever, and that is that you set up a bad guy. That bad guy is the other, and that guy wants to kill us and destroy us, and therefore we are obligated to destroy them. And this is the way a lot of cults operate. This is the way a lot of when you go through violent periods with religions, that's where they've gone to, is they've picked out an enemy and said, the righteous will defeat this enemy. Politically, that's exactly what's been going on, is the separation of people into left and right, and whatever party you belong to, the opposite party is evil. And so this is, so it makes sense that you see this reflected in comics, and most media is just more or less just speaking the mind of the left in politics. They just reflect all that because most of the people in comics are left, or the people with power, are typically on the left. It's unfortunate, and also I think you're right that the values of culture has changed. There is no common value. That's the problem. There's no common value anymore. Everybody has their own group values, their own individual group values, and that's part of the problem with America. And you see that reflected in comics.
Right. Real quick, we should touch on the artwork before we wrap this up.
Sure.
I just wanted to make just some quick comments that have, first on the cover of 176. Mm-hmm. Their artwork's very simple, very flat. We don't really have a lot of depth. We can maybe even look at the cape, the flat wall in the background, and a lot of text, a whole lot of text. Issue 65, we kind of come where we're really showing dimension. They're flying toward us. They're really elongating the body there. The way the cape, like I said, you can look at the cape in all three of these. The cape really showing some dynamic flares and the wind and whatnot. Mm-hmm. Then with the last one, issue 28, my gosh, the cape is dynamic in itself, and you're really seeing the dimensional, even their legs are intertwined, and we see the dimensional aspects, and where I guess computers kind of come into play. But I don't know, I guess
the colors.
I'm not as artistic maybe as you would be, so you can go ahead and comment. But I just real quickly just wanted to note those how you really see the dimensions or the the Z axis, I guess. It really becomes important as comics develop.
Well, one of the things that happened with comics is that in the early days, you had a very limited number of colors you could use in print, and you were very restricted in what you were able to do, and that meant that if you wanted to do something like shadowing and doing any kind of like gray values or just switching values of the same color or any of those things, the only way you could do is sort of fake it with line work. And that's why line work became such an explosive aspect of comics in the 90s, was because it really built over the years this using a black and white and then hatching and cross hatching to trick the eye into believing that you had two different colors. So if you have one flat blue color there, then you thin out the line where the light source is coming from to make it look like it's in some ways a little bit brighter. It's almost like it's bleeding through the black line. But then where there is more shadow, you use more heavy blacks and hatch work. And that creates a gradient that then makes the same color blue, tricks your eye into believing that maybe this is a darker shade of that blue or something like that. But then with the 90s, the early to mid 90s, you really had the explosion in the use of like Photoshop and the ability to use digital colors. And so then for a long time, it was digital colors and the line work together. And so it created its own kind of interesting thing where the colors had to color people like Jim Lee and other very kind of line heavy guys in such a way where they're now able to truly do things with the colors. There's more colors available for printing in the actual magazines, so they're able to do that. And but then you see now, when you look at this one, let me look at it. I think it has more. It has less. I can't see it, so I'm speaking out of my head right now. So you still got a lot of kind of the blacks kind of there, but it's more. But there's more going on with the colors. You've got a different hues or different shades of blue there, and the reds, and so then the line work becomes less important. And so with my stuff, when I do my artwork, I use very thin lines all over, and I try to use color to express it. And I do that because the technology is available. Why not use it? It saves time, because that cross hatching takes forever, and I've never been very good at it. I'm better at just taking the color and putting it in there more appropriately. And I like a simplicity when I draw. I like to draw very simple lines. So that's why you see this change in the artwork. And the older artwork tended to be flat because there just weren't really there wasn't really the option to do that. And as you move forward, there is an ability to create more depth with newer art techniques. A lot of the artists, they really varied in their early art days between capability as far as art goes. Some of them were really good and amazing and dynamic, and some of them weren't. And I mean, they were really bad. That's my struggle in the 90s, was that you had a lot of weird art styles that came out. Some of them were just like bad. They were trying to do Jim Lee, but Jim Lee, if he was 5, is what it kind of came off as sometimes. And so yeah, the progression in art and comics has become better and better and better, but the stories have gotten worse.
I think that's true.
Right? Yeah. I mean, look, I collected X-Men in the 90s. That's because I enjoyed the X-Men, because I liked the artwork. I stopped reading comics. I started collecting art pieces. And that's what in the 90s, 2000s, comics became more and more. And even still, I get suckered into an issue depending on how good the art is, and then I'll flip that comic book open. And sometimes I can't stand to read a comic that's not well drawn. Um, but look, the '90s were a very interesting period. You had these strides toward a lot more artists, which is better. And you look at there's a lot more competent artists doing comics, or have been doing comics the last 20, 30 years. In some ways, they're more technically proficient. They're more animated in some ways. They have lots of interesting styles, but the stories aren't much to write home about. And they take like 2 minutes to read, and there's no reason to pay $8 to read a 2-minute story. Hey, it looks like we have run out of time. I can't believe that we're already done with this episode. This was a great suggestion, Brian. Thanks for doing the research on these comics and opening the door for us to talk about it. So we'll be here again next week. Same New Hero Comics time, same New Hero Comics place. And it will be 9 o'clock in Israel, 2 o'clock in Eastern time in the US on Thursday. And we'll have a new month next week. We'll be in March. And so anyway, guys, thanks a lot. Have a great week. Bye, Brian.